So let me show you my all-time favorite table saw hack. So I know what you're thinking. What exactly is this rinky-dink little gizmo that I have here? These are table saw auxiliary fence clamps, and in my opinion, they're probably the best accessory that you can get for your table saw. So I'm gonna quickly show you how to make a repetitive crosscut block. Then we'll have a look at making an auxiliary fence with a featherboard attachment, and I'll show you the 4 things that I use these clamps for all the time. So stick around. This is really table saw gold. You're not gonna wanna miss it. Wow, that was a lot of hype. Let's get into the video. So in order to make one of these little repetitive crosscut blocks, you wanna find some scrap wood, rip it down to the same width as your table saw fence. In terms of the length, you wanna make sure that it comes to the back of your fence, but it's short enough so that you have about 3 to 4, even 5 inches clear of the front of your blade. That's gonna allow any cutoff pieces some space, and it's not gonna pinch on the fence. And then on the top of this little block here, you want to just drill yourself a hole down deep enough so that your particular clamp can slide down all the way. I'll put links in the description for these clamps as well as a few others that look pretty nice. And then the real key here with this little block is you want to find some material that is 1 inch thick if you're working in the imperial system. If you're looking at metric, you probably want to find something 20 to 30 millimeters thick. You can cut them down or laminate and build it up. That allows you to continue to use your table saw scale. I have a beautiful scale on the shop saw as well as this little job site DeWalt saw. So yeah, with the 1 inch thick, you just subtract the inch and you can continue to use the scale with no need for a tape measure for any of the little crosscut pieces that you're gonna do. So now you might be asking yourself the question, what exactly is the big deal and why do you keep going on about this stupid block? So there's really kind of 3 things that I primarily do with the block. The first of which being is I don't have a miter saw set up in my garage most of the time. So anytime I need to make some kind of a small cut here or there, I will just use the table saw, oftentimes with this block. And then the 2 kind of main things that I use this thing for all the time, when I was installing cabinets quite a bit, probably once every couple of weeks, I would cut like a whole whack load of shims. I would cut them all the way to a 1/16 of an inch wide, all the way up to 1/2 inch. And this little setup here was just the fastest way that I found to cut a whack load of shims. And then the second thing that I use this little setup for, making these little sanding blocks. This is a great setup. So to make these little sanding blocks, cut some 3/4 inch plywood down to 2 inches wide and 8 7/8 inches long, which will allow a little bit of overhang that you can trim off with a knife. And if you want a couple of these sanding blocks, drop a comment below, make a comment, mention that you'd like a couple blocks. I'll pick a winner and then I will mail you a couple blocks. If you live in Australia, you're probably not going to win, but you can comment anyways. Who knows, I could investigate how much it would be to send a couple of these to Australia. So let's talk auxiliary fence. If you own a table saw, you definitely need an auxiliary fence. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with a situation like I have here with my job site fence, where the blade is just digging into the fence. There's gonna be all kinds of occasions when you're gonna need to get the fence right up tight to the blade. So for this particular fence here, to make something like this, you just wanna get some scrap wood, cut it to the length of your existing table saw fence, and then whatever kind of a feather board you're going to use, this is just a little cheap plastic one. You can get these for like $10 or $15 at the tool store. If there is links, I'll put them in the description. You can also just make your own feather board. But yeah, whatever feather board you're going to be using, if you want to put this little attachment on there, just cut it to the width of the overall feather board. And then you want to orientate where you want to put your feather board. I like to put mine just behind the center of the blade. That way when you're pushing material through, you're gonna push it past the center point and it's not gonna get caught up in the feather board. You can put it a little further up the front, but I like to put mine about 1 inch behind the center of the blade. So lay out the feather board location, And then you want to just mark out the height of your fence. You don't want to be any higher than the fence or any lower, so mark that out. And then you can go ahead and cut that out. I cut this out using the table saw and a jigsaw. You could also use a skill saw. Skill saw might be a little safer, but it might not be as accurate. So cut that out, and then I just sanded up these curves, and then I broke all of the edges just so that they're not going to chip off in the future. Next thing you want to do is just figure out how you're going to mount the featherboard to this top section here. In my case, I had to do a little recess hole in the back just because of the bolts that I have were limited in length. So I got that all nice and secure. There's nice little wing nuts on the back here for adjusting this height-wise. So there really is just an abundance of things you can do with an auxiliary fence here. You could attach a taller fence if you wanted to do some mortise and tenon type cutting. The two things that I end up using this fence for all the time, the first thing is cutting really thin laminate or any kind of thin material on here. You can push this auxiliary fence right down tight to your table. That way when you're running your piece through, it's not going to slide under the fence and get jammed and make a giant disaster out of it. And then the second thing that I use this little setup here for is to make rabbets. I will put the dado blade onto my saw, and when I'm making cabinets, cabinet sides, or even drawer bottoms, I will put a little rabbet into the material. And what this little setup allows is it can hold it down nice and tight so you get a consistent depth rabbet. And as well, you can do a little relief cut into your auxiliary fence, and that way you're gonna get a really nice clean outer edge of the rabbet. And if you're in the market for a miter saw, check out this video right over here. Depending on what you need it for, you might not need to spend as much money as you think. Are you clicking on the video? It's right, should be here. I'll put my face right behind the video. Just poke me in the eye with the mouse pointer or your finger and click on the video, and we'll see you over there. Thanks for watching.